Stone by day, warriors at night. Betrayed by the humans they had sworn to protect. Frozen in stone by a magic spell for 1,000 years. Now the spell is broken, and they live again. They are the defenders of the night. They are gargoyles. A show about a group of nocturnal creatures who have lived for thousands of years, with their roots going back to the year 994 in ancient Scotland. During those times, even though they served as protectors under the royal palace, they were largely seen as monsters by the people, who were repulsed by their presence and had no trust in them at all. Some of the gargoyles, one in particular, felt the same way about humans, but more on that later. Gargoyles was first released on October 24th, 1994 in the US, but my first encounter of this show was on GMTV Saturday mornings, when it came on in the UK around 1996 if my memory serves me correctly. It had been advertised a few weeks prior to its UK TV debut. Now I didn't pay too much attention, and it wasn't until 3 weeks later that I just happened to come across the show whilst I was channel surfing, and this was prior to satellite or cable TV. I saw that I was in the midst of the show's 5-part opening story, Awakening, and I had just come into it on part 4. The main character Goliath was being protected by Detective Elisa Mazam when he turned to stone during the day. Then there was all the action on the show. There was the female gargoyle named Demona, who was revealed to have played a part in the demise of the gargoyles from ancient Scotland, and was Goliath's lover turned enemy. There was billionaire David Xanatos, who had played his part in bringing the gargoyles back to life. And then there were the other gargoyles: Hudson, Bronx, Brooklyn, Broadway, and Lexington. The show had a very serious, dark tone to it. I was unfamiliar with the whole concept of the show, but just by the way it was playing out, its presentation, the character iterations, I was immediately hooked. And for the duration of its run, I would tune into GMTV Saturday mornings to watch the show. It was a staple of my Saturday mornings alongside Batman the Animated Series. It was an amazing animated show with excellent stories, arcs, great action, and great voice acting, on par with Batman TAS. And something I found very unusual was that it was a Disney show. Now when you think of Disney shows, you think of shows like DuckTales, Aladdin, Chip and Dale. This show was nothing like any of those. Although a little history note on Gargoyles. Here we go. Gargoyles was originally pitched as a comedy adventure series, more in the vein of a show like The Gummy Bears, but in the modern world. The gargoyles were not merely stone statues, but real flesh and blood creatures. But unlike the noble warriors that they would end up becoming in the finalized version, these gargoyles were mischievous troublemakers who would frequently drive humans nuts. The comedy development went through several iterations before eventually being scrapped in favour of a more serious show, which ended up being the Gargoyles as we knew them. So Disney made a very bold choice and scrapped their tried and trusted formula in favour of something that was darker, and I'd say it worked to perfection. Now there is so much to get into with Gargoyles, so I'm not even sure where to begin. I suppose I could start with the show's main premise and how it began, so starting off with the show's 5-part opening story, Awakening. It is the year 994 AD in ancient Scotland. A medieval castle is under attack from Vikings. The royal guards are fighting them off with the aid of a race of winged creatures known as the Gargoyles. Together they are able to send the Vikings into retreat. Despite their heroic efforts, they are largely seen by the people as monsters not to be trusted, and with the princess of the castle being their loudest naysayer. The female gargoyle who accompanies their leader Goliath is not enamored with humans either, and feels they need to be ruled as gargoyles are the superior race. The female gargoyle will be later known as Demona. Now at this point, Goliath was the only gargoyle who had a name and the others did not. The distrust of the gargoyles comes to a head when they are betrayed after an attack by the Vikings, which took place very close to dawn. Once the sun had risen, the gargoyles had turned to stone. This left them at the mercy of the Vikings, with their leader Hakan smashing the statues to pieces and killing them in the process. It turns out the captain of the guards was a traitor, and he let the Vikings into the palace willingly, as he had declared that the gargoyles were not his own kind. His prejudice on full display, costing the lives of several gargoyles. Goliath along with his mentor, return to the castle that had been burned into flames, and Goliath can only howl in anguish, believing his love Demona has been part of the casualties. The captain somewhat atoned for his betrayal when, during a fight with Hakan, they both fall to their deaths. The princess is spared a similar fate when she is rescued by Goliath. The princess's love Magus had placed a spell on the Gargoyles to permanently turn them to stone, as revenge on the Gargoyles, as he had believed they had killed the princess. Hakan had burnt the pages of the magic book used to cast the spell, and he is unable to reverse it. The only way for the spell to be broken now would be for the castle to rise above the clouds. The princess and Magus apologize for the wrong that they have caused the Gargoyles, and to atone for their bad deeds, they will look after the eggs with unborn Gargoyles. Goliath and the surviving Gargoyles are then placed under a magic spell that saw them turn to stone and sleep. They would remain that way until the spell could be broken, for 1,000 years. Enter billionaire industrialist David Xanatos. He had just purchased the castle for an undisclosed sum, probably in the billions. He has read up on the Gargoyles' history through a book written by Magus, which he managed to retrieve, and he is keen to bring the Gargoyles to life for his own needs. With the castle now high enough to go above the clouds, the Gargoyles are brought back to life. Their resurrection causes a storm, with stone falling onto the ground, causing mass chaos and destruction to the residents of New York City. The Gargoyles enjoy a reunion, but are puzzled by their new surroundings. Xanatos greets them and informs them of how long they've been in stone and to their current whereabouts, and they are indeed the last of their kind to survive. The castle is then invaded by a group of commandos who attempt to lay siege to Xanatos and the castle. The Gargoyles spring into action and chase the commandos off. Following the action, Detective Eliza Maza investigates, and she ends up discovering Goliath, much to her initial shock, before ultimately befriending him. Xanatos then asks Goliath to go on a mission to retrieve 3 discs that were stolen from him. Goliath ponders before agreeing to this, although unbeknownst to him, Xanatos is speaking with a shadowy figure, with him stating, "Everything is going according to plan." Fast forward, and Goliath has met up with Elisa after their introduction in the castle. In an alleyway, he fights off some street thugs whom have ambushed the couple. The couple are scared of the sight of the Goliath and they run off, with Goliath perplexed as to whether this was human gratitude. He is then shot with a tranquilizer dart by another group of commandos, similar to the ones who already attacked the castle. Their leader approaches them, ready to end them and pull the trigger. They both manage to fight their way out of their predicament and go into hiding. Goliath then reveals his turning to stone during the day to Elisa. With the commandos on the hunt, Elisa has to fight them off and keep a watchful eye on Goliath until nightfall. When he comes to, he thanks Elisa for saving his life. They reunite with the other Gargoyles and go about a mission to retrieve the stolen discs, but not before an emotional reunion between Goliath and Demona. Whilst on the mission, Goliath notices Demona's aggressive and heartless approach to dealing with the commandos. They succeed in retrieving the discs, but Goliath is disheartened by Demona's antics, declaring her hard and unforgiving. The plot now thickens, with Xanatos now declaring Goliath hard to control and that the Gargoyles have outlived their usefulness. And he sets about his plan to have them replaced by mechanical versions that look like Goliath. They proceed to attack the Gargoyles, and in the ensuing melee they manage to defeat them. However, this is where Demona and Xanatos reveal their true intentions, and using a pair of large laser cannons prepare to kill the Gargoyles. Elisa arrives just in time to thwart Demona from killing Goliath. The struggle sets the cannon off, shooting around the castle, causing debris to fall around and knock out Xanatos. The damage also sees the area where Demona and Lisa were fighting crumble, with Goliath forced to save one of them, opting for Lisa, while Demona just continues to plummet to the ground with the debris following her. Angered at his betrayal and Demona's demise, Goliath grabs Xanatos and threatens to kill him. He's talked out of it by Elisa. The billionaire winds up in prison. The Gargoyles regroup and take their place as they did 1,000 years ago as the protectors of the castle, with Elisa wondering,
I wonder if this city's ready for you guys.
So that was the big introduction with this 5-part story awakening. An excellent group of stories that introduces the Gargoyles as they were in ancient times, and then bringing them into the modern day world with them having to adjust. Their allies and enemies are established at this point, and from there on they go on to have plenty of adventures with Xanatos and Demona their main antagonists. They have been briefly touched upon, but the main characters are Goliath, the leader of the Gargoyles, strong, intelligent, a good sense of morality, and at times has a short temper. He was the only Gargoyle to initially have a name, as he was named after the biblical giant by his human protectors. Brooklyn, made officially the second in command of the Gargoyles. He is at times reckless and cynical, over time becomes a cool and calm, level-headed member of the team. Broadway, the often comical Gargoyle of the group. He loves food, ergo he takes on the hobby of cooking. He also loves his westerns and he loves his detective movies. Lexington, he can be described as the Donatello of the Gargoyles and becomes the group's resident tech expert. He has a great fascination with technology and he loves his gadgets and gizmos. Hudson, he is the wise man of the group, and once upon a time he was the leader of the Gargoyles before he handed the reins over to Goliath. When not in action, he spends most of his time in front of the television. Bronx, the resident pet of the Gargoyles, a dog-like gargoyle beast who is often by the side of Hudson. Detective Elisa Mazza, a New York police detective who is the Gargoyles' closest ally and aids them in several of their missions. She later becomes romantically involved with Goliath. Think about that for a second. Demona. She was formerly part of the clan and was Goliath's love interest. She is immortal, owing to a magic pact or a spell that she shares with another Gargoyle alumni, Macbeth. The spell was placed upon them by the three witches, and as a result, both have lived for over 1,000 years. She was named by Macbeth after her demonic fighting skills. She ends up becoming human by day and Gargoyle by night after being tricked by the magical being Puck when she intended for the spell to make her awake during the day. She creates a human persona for herself, whilst in this form she is known as Xanatos is a billionaire and he's the CEO of Xanatos Enterprises and is the Gargoyles' persistent nemesis during the first 2 seasons. He broke the spell that imprisoned the Gargoyles by having the castle placed on his building and have it rise above the clouds. He frequently attempted to manipulate or control them, and he is the main reason behind a number of the Gargoyles' enemies. He later becomes their ally after rescuing the Gargoyles from a mob and police hunt. Okay, now the main characters I've already mentioned, but there are also others who come in and they also make their impacts. I will mention a few of the more notable ones. Macbeth. He's the former King of Scotland and he was loosely based on the Shakespearean character as well as the real historical figure. He is forever bound to Demona and is forced to live in conflict with her. Neither one can die until one simultaneously kills the other. Any pain felt by one, the other will suffer simultaneously when they are in close range. Like when Demona changes from human to Gargoyle. Macbeth starts off as an enemy to the Gargoyles, but like Xanatos, he later becomes their ally. He tried to claim the sword Excalibur for himself, but he did not succeed in doing so. He often goes by his other alias, Lennox Macduff, as a play from the 2 Shakespearean characters. Angela, one of the unhatched eggs that was safeguarded by the princess just before the Gargoyles went to sleep for 1,000 years. The egg hatches to become the young Gargoyle named Angela. She's the biological daughter of both Demona and Goliath. Goliath refused to accept her as his own, insisting that the whole clan can be seen as her parents. He later comes around to accepting her, and she tries to bond with Demona, but Demona's hatred of humanity and Goliath sees her efforts fail. She does end up in a relationship with Broadway. Now personally I would have thought Brooklyn was the better fit, but hey, the nerdy Gargoyle got the girl here. The Pack, a group comprised of 5 gladiator-style warriors who were TV stars. In reality, they were hired muscle by Xanatos to take out the Gargoyles. The group members were siblings Jackal and Hyena, Dingo, Wolf, and Fox, the leader of the group, and she wound up becoming David Xanatos' wife, and they would go on to have a baby. After their first encounter, the pack would go on to have several encounters with the Gargoyles, with members of the pack getting major cybernetic enhancements. and Fox would step away from the pack after they were jailed, and she would serve her time, and she wound up with Xanatos. Dingo would eventually end up becoming a good guy, and he went back to his native Australia. The Weird Sisters, Phoebe, Selene, and Luna. They were a trio of goddesses who wielded powerful magic, and were named after 3 Greco-Roman goddesses of the moon, and they were based on the witches from Shakespeare's Macbeth. Anton Sevarius, a brilliant but mad scientist who worked for practically all the villains on the series, from Xanatos to Demona. He is responsible for creating the villainous Thailog, the clone of the Goliath, as well as the clones of all the other gargoyles, and the genetically engineered mutates, of which included Talon, who was formerly Elisa's younger brother, Derek Marza. Overall, he was a morally bankrupt character and one of the more memorable villains. Owen Burnett. He is the personal assistant to Xanatos, and he serves as a person with major power and influence within Xanatos' company, Xanatos Enterprises. However, Owen was not whom he appeared to be, and he is revealed to be the immortal trickster, Puck. He offers Xanatos chance at immortality, who surprisingly turns it down and has Puck serve as his personal assistant under the guise of Owen. This is after Xanatos deduced his real identity. Puck's appearances on the show left quite an impact, as his spell caused for Demona to change from gargoyle at night to human by day. Thailog. He was a clone of Goliath created by Anton Severius, and possesses Goliath's physical strength and Xanatos' intelligence, making him one of the gargoyles' most dangerous foes. He later teams up with Demona in a partnership/relationship, although he has his own devious reasons as to why. He ends up creating his own clan of gargoyle clones, which were created from the DNAs of the gargoyles. He even has Anton Severius create a hybrid human gargoyle which combined the DNAs of both Elisa and Demona. This gargoyle is known as Delilah. He was probably the most formidable foe for the gargoyles and Goliath, in particular due to his strength, intellect, and cunning. Now there's a whole world of gargoyles characters that I could go to, but for the sake of time on this video, I will look to do another video later on exploring the other fascinating characters from the show.
To be continued.
Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and if you want to see more, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.